Hello, today we will be installing HIFIS on a Windows machine. I have already done the configurations necessary for IIS and other softwares. That can be found, if necessary, for configuring your server in the proper documentation. Now, the first thing we need to do is go to the following URL, which is support.hifis.ca/software release version du logiciel. What you need to download to set up an initial instance of HIFIS will be the complete database and the complete software. If you're updating HIFIS, you're going to want the relative software package as well, plus the update instead of the complete database, as these run different scripts. In an update instance, the software overrides itself, so that can be covered at another time. You'll also need crystal reports, unless you already have that. Now, I've already downloaded these files. We can see that I have the database components here, and the first thing we're going to do is actually open the complete script in SQL, which should happen automatically for me. Okay, and now we are connecting to the SQL Server instance. Obviously, you will have to know how to connect to your server. This is just my local machine to keep things extremely simple. Now, in this script, we can see that there are two things up here which need to be modified. The first one is the database name. This is what your database will be called. The second one is the relative path. This is actually where this script file was saved. So easiest thing to do is to highlight this line, copy it, and then we're going to go ahead and paste it directly in this spot. Don't worry, this isn't changing or actually choosing where the database is installed. It is just telling the script where to find itself. And I'm totally okay with this HIFIS name here. It's HIFIS4_58. For our purposes, that does not matter, but you can feel free to change that to anything you'd like. Now we go up to the top bar and hit Query, SQL Command Mode. These will be highlighted when you're ready to run it. You can click Execute. There we go. This has completed successfully. It can take several minutes to run, depending on the speed of your computer. So the next thing that I like to do is to open the database, find my newly created HIFIS4 database, click on the properties here after right-clicking, and then I can see under the extended properties that this is HIFIS version 58.2.4 complete. And that means that it was fully installed because I know that that's the relative number for this version of the software. So we are done now with the database side of things, and we're going to minimize that to get out of the way. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and start working with the application. So we're going to open IIS, and in here we can see that there is a default site with apparently a pre-existing HIFIS web and a HIFIS domain, which I'm going to delete because we do not need those. What we are going to do next, however, is take these same files here, and we're going to copy all of this into the proper location. This is currently in my downloads, and I want to go into my local disk. I want to go into pub, then the www root, and here is where I'm going to paste these items. So this will take a moment to copy. Excellent. Now that those are copied over, I personally like to rename both of these files. Rename, to have a dot in them, because they will appear in the URL in the way that I am setting this up. Again, all of this can be modified to suit your needs specifically, but this is how I choose to do it. The first option I'm going to go into is domain. Now we can see in domain here there's a big list of files. I'm going to make that bigger. There's a big list of files, but there is no web config. What we have, though, is a domain template config file. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it. And then I have this copy now so I can rename it to web.config. Very important that you keep the domain template because it's a really good reference in case anything goes wrong. Again, you can always get these files back, but I find this to be the most reliable way of doing it. I do not want to update this right now. Now, what we need to do here after opening the web config file, which is a .config, so you can right-click and open it with Notepad or Notepad++ if you have that on your machine, we need to change these parameters. Now, the data source is going to be your SQL Server. The initial catalog is going to be the name of your HIFIS database, and by default, the user ID and the password are also going to be the name of your HIFIS database. This can be changed, of course. You can use integrated security, or you can modify these to be something else. I will not be covering that in this video. we will be replacing these connection strings in the following lines. We can see that these 3 lines, this really long one here, have those variables. So we have the data source right here, for example, that appears on all 3 of those lines, and then followed by the initial catalog, followed by the user ID here and the password here, which does appear on all 3 lines, except this last one is very long. The easiest way that I find to do this is to grab your data source. Using Notepad++, you can find the replace option, and I'm going to replace this with my SQL server. So I'm going to go back to SQL. I'm going to hit the connect button to a database engine. I'm going to copy this server name, which is, in fact, my SQL server name for the data source. I paste that in here, and I hit replace all. Now I can see that if I scroll down, I've got that SQL Express desktop in this string, and in this string as well, without having to do it a bunch of times. We're going to do that exact same thing with the initial catalog. So I'm going to copy that, paste it up here, and I'm going to replace it with what I know to be HIFIS 4_58, which is the name of my database. And I'm going to replace all. Then I'm going to grab the user ID, paste that up here, replace all, user password, paste that up here, and replace all. And then we can go again and do our sanity check to make sure that those indeed were replaced. And we should see a bunch of HIFIS 458, so there should be 3 on each line, and there we go. We can see that those are all done, and they look to be good. And this is why I absolutely love Notepad++, because it does the things that Notepad does not. This variable here can be modified if you're using SQL Server 2011 drivers. I'm going to leave that off for now, and we'll go back to it if we need to. You can also see in here that we have all of the basic connection strings for the application itself. I am whizzing through these just to make sure there's nothing else in here that I need to cover. You will be able to see all of these in detail on the actual file yourself, and that is the extent of domain modifications. Although it is called web, I realize that is somewhat confusing, and we're going to save that in administrator mode. And because it's Notepad++, it saves those changes, even though we didn't have it open in that in the first point. So if you are running this on a server that does not have Notepad++, please remember to open, should have mentioned this, but open Notepad in administrator mode the first time around, or you will lose all those changes in Notepad because it's old and it doesn't do smart things. The next thing we're going to do is go to IIS, actually. So we've done our domain, and then we're going to set up our web as well. So we're going to open that. We're going to do the same thing for the web template. I'm going to copy it, paste it in here, and then I'm going to rename it web.config. So this is where it can get a little confusing. This is the web.config, and the other one is the domain web.config. Now in here, there's a couple more things to modify. We're going to be doing the same thing to the data source, initial catalog, user ID, and user password. We're also going to figure out what the HIFIS domain address is, and you can choose what your session timeouts are. I will not be going over mail settings. However, if you are running HIFIS on a server that is also related to an infrastructure that has webmail applications, then you should know what these variables are, and they are represented up here because they correlate just like these connection strings to different data points lower in the file. There's also more things to do in the web.config. We will be going through those all in order. So data source, we're going to find that, replace that with, and hopefully it remembers it. Yeah, we got our SQL right there, and we're going to replace all. Then we're going to do the exact same thing, and I'm super lazy, so we're going to go initial catalog, replace with that, replace all. Then we're going to go to the user ID next, replace all. And you can see here that it's only replacing 2 occurrences. It's because there's only 1 connection string in this file, replace all as well, and it's all the way at the bottom. So that connection string that we're looking for is this big one right here, and we can see that we have the source, and then we have our catalog, and then we have our user and our password. So this is on the web side of the application. So we're going to go back to the top. And now we need to figure out what our HIFIS domain address is. We don't know it quite yet, so we're going to do some work in IIS to find out, but I do know what I want to set my session timeout to, so I'm going to grab the session timeout, paste it up here, and put a good 20 minutes. Replace all 2 occurrences. Fantastic. So to find out what our HIFIS domain address is, we go into IIS. We refresh our default website. Now, these are under default web. You do not have to do it that way. I am doing it that way for the sake of brevity, but you can make them into their own sites and their own app pools. You can get as complex or as straightforward as you'd like with this. I'm going to make it as simple as possible for the sake of the video. And I'm going to right-click on both of these and convert them to applications. Because I already put the files and the folders where I wanted them to be, all I have to do on this window is hit OK, and do the same for the domain. OK. So now I can see that the icon has changed, and I have applications under HIFIS Web and HIFIS Domain. When I have HIFIS Domain selected, I'm going to go down to the bottom, hit Content View here, one of these little tabs almost, like an inverted tab, and I'm going to click on one of these business services. You can see that these are the SVCs, so business service address, and I'm going to go on the right-hand side here and hit Browse. And we're going to see what comes up. Excellent. This is a working domain service. It is connected to the database, and we can now see that we have a URL. This is running locally on my machine, but we can see that the URL is localhost, HIFIS domain, business service, address service. And that correlates directly to the address service SVC that we have here. So what we can do is we can copy the localhost aspect and the HIFIS domain aspect in itself, copy. And that is what we're going to put into the web config file. So we're going to go back up here, and we can see HIFIS domain address. So I'm going to not copy that because I already copied what I wanted. I'm going to place that up here. And then I'm going to copy this, copy, paste it up here. But before I do, I want to find the next instance so I can show you. So I'm going to go down and find it in the actual file. There we go. These are the actual variables. And we can see here that by default, these are HTTP, HIFIS domain address, which is what you need to fill in, and then HIFIS domain business services, activity services, which is exactly the same as, no longer need that, this guy right up here, but it has the localhost HIFIS domain. When you're configuring this with an actual server, with an actual URL, with an actual IP address, this may or may not, depending on the way that your server is set up, be a localhost. That's up to you. I'm going to get it working on my local machine, but I'm not going to go into the depth of getting this working online because I don't have a website to host it on. So we're going to go and hit Replace All. Boom. And we can see now that this has been replaced for every single one of these services, and there are 60 of them, give or take, roughly. And we can just quickly go through to make sure that that's all done, and we're happy. Oh, happy accident. Here are the mail settings. Just as a quick aside, there are 2 lines of mail settings. So there's the SMTP email, and then the actual connection information below that. The SMTP email is what you choose, so let's say HIFIS@mydomain.ca, or HIFIS at the community's domain, etc. Whatever's been decided, that goes on that top line, and then the connection stuff goes on the bottom. Again, not my area of expertise, but this is where it is, line 790 or so in the web config. Now, we're going to go back to the top of this document because there are a couple things that we need to work through. First thing being the MIME map. So we're going to go to line 140, which should be about here. Excellent. So comment out the following line on Windows Server 2016. Okay, so we're going to comment that out with a big alligator, exclamation mark, dash dash, and then we're going to do the opposite, dash dash, and closing alligator. Yes, they are called alligators. It is the official term. Then we are going to go session timeout minutes, which we've already done, and we can see for reference that that's on line 218 down here. Boom, session timeout minutes. Okay, so I've already changed that to 20 in my quick way from the top, but you do not have to do it that way. This also brings us to an interesting area that has Ssl configuration. I am not configuring this with SSL in this video here, but this is related to adding security to HIFIS itself. Okay, and then the next thing we need to do is change the Elma log directory. So that's going to be all the way at the bottom. I don't need this. And we can see here that we've got the Elma log dir, which is where errors will be calculated. I am going to change that to just say Elma so that it can correlate to a much nicer looking folder. So Elma here will be in HIFIS web. I'm going to make a new folder. Yes, We're going to call that ELMAH. Boom. Now, we have to make sure that IIS can write to ELMA. There's a couple different folders that it needs to be able to write to in order to generate reports and to create these errors. So we're going to work through this, and we're going to start with ELMA. So we're going to go in the properties of ELMA. We're going to go to security. We're going to go edit. Then we're going to go to the II_I user. It's very important that the right user here is chosen. Sometimes there are multiple I users or different ways that communities have this set up from an IT level. Make sure that's the right one where, like, from the program that the application is actually installed on, or else it won't be able to write to it. And we're going to give it full control, apply, okay, okie dokie. Now, we test what we have done. We're going to go back here. We're going to go to HIFIS web as a whole, and we're going to hit browse and see what happens. Okay. See, we made a very classic mistake, which is I totally forgot to save. So we're going to go back to this guy, we're going to save it, and then we're going to run it again. I'm going to leave this in the video because a lot of the times there's these little things that I forget to do and they cause me trouble. And this is a really good example of that happening, but it's an easy fix. The error message that popped up here showed me directly where the first problem was happening in the web config, and HIFIS is still loading up in the corner, so it will take a few minutes on the first run. So I knew exactly what my mistake was. The web config didn't think this line was commented out, so I knew that I hadn't saved it. This is really useful information if you're troubleshooting a HIFIS install, so do keep that in mind, and I'm happy I didn't overlook it. Okay, so we've got a problem here on login. See ELMA for details, and I'm going to refresh that real quick, but also go into our HIFIS web, ELMA folder, and we've got some files here. So the most recent one should be relevant to what we need. See, that's that folder that was not given permission. So HIFIS web report docs temp. What we're going to do is close this, go here, report docs folder's right there. We're going to go to the properties of it. We're going to go to security. We're going to go to edit, iUser. Nope, don't need to add, but iUser, I need to give full control. Click, apply, okay, okay. Now, we should be able to browse to HIFIS web successfully. Let's check that last one. No, it did not save. So we're going to wait a moment. Every time something like that changes, the app refreshes. So it will take a few minutes or moments, depending on how quick your machine is, to either load the working app or the next error. And we've got another error here, so let's see what that is. And for anyone watching, I'm intentionally leaving these errors in this video so that we can go through them together as a part of the troubleshooting process. Is that the right error? Oh, no, that's the wrong error. This is the relevant one. So we can see that the error we had here was related to not commenting out this line, or not enabling this SQL Client 11 based on the software that I was running. So do keep that in mind, that in some instances this needs to be commented, in some it does not. So that's where I was doing that troubleshooting. And now we can see that we have logged in successfully to HIFIS. The login will be admin, and the password is 123456. For an actual installation, I highly recommend changing that immediately so that only your relevant users can log into the admin account. And you can see here that we have a HIFIS installation up and running with build 58.3. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please comment, like, and subscribe.